30-year-old Sam Polk made $5 million in bonuses alone when he was working on Wall Street. But he decided to leave his job as a trader at the age of 30 because he realized that he had developed a severe addiction to money and he hated the culture that existed in Wall Street. So he wrote this piece in the New York Times and he was extremely candid and honest about his experiences. He talked about how, government officials were like buddies and they were treated like royalty. The members of Wall Street were treated like royalty by the politicians. And he also wrote the following. One of the things I came to realize was I had been using money as this thing that would quell all my fears. So I had this belief that maybe someday I would get enough money that I would no longer be scared. I would feel successful. And one of the things I learned on Wall Street was no matter how much money I made, the money was never going to do it.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, it's never enough. There's no end to greed. And I read his article when he first wrote it, and I thought it was really powerful. And it first introduced the idea to me that money could be an addiction.
Of course.
I don't know why I didn't think of that before. Yeah. And the way that they act, in the same way that addicts act, they got to get more. They got to get their fix, and they can't let anybody else have more than them. And unless you're removed from that bubble, you can't get out of that treadmill. It was a really powerful statement.
So he kind of talked about how he was making millions of dollars at the age of 25, which is crazy. But he would sit next to billionaires on a regular basis. And it was this competition between him and billionaires. And you felt like you had to participate in that competition to get the validation you needed, right? So it was a validation thing, it was an ego thing, it was an addiction thing. And it's really fascinating to see how that culture works, because oftentimes when we have these debates about taxes and corporate tax loopholes and everything, we always wonder why it is that the most wealthy people in the country, including the Koch brothers, just can't get enough, right? They're destroying the country in the process of trying to cut their taxes as much as possible, but they don't care. They want more.
The quote I love most is this one, because it explains that to a large degree. He says, I was at a meeting with one of them and a few other traders, referring to a really rich hedge fund guy, and he said, and they were talking about the new hedge fund regulations. Most everyone on Wall Street thought they were a bad idea. But isn't it better for the system as a whole, I asked. The room went quiet, and my boss shot me a withering look. I remember his saying, I don't have the brain capacity to think about the system as a whole. All I'm concerned with is how this affects our company. I felt as I'd been punched in the gut. He was afraid of losing money, despite all that he had. So I took something else away from that quote. Yes, he's afraid of losing money, he's addicted to money, but think about how short-term they think. Mm-hmm. Like the system as a whole and the whole thing collapses. Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't care. And by the way, these are supposed to be the masters of the universe and really really brainy and smart and stuff. He's like, I don't have the brain capacity to think of the system as a whole.
Yeah.
But boy, then you need to get a new job,
yes.
Right? But he doesn't care. He just thinks, how much am I going to make at the end of this year? That's all I care about. Now, if you have those kind of short-term incentives, yeah, of course you're going to do damage in the long term. You don't give a damn about the long term, let alone to anyone else. I mean, he doesn't even care that much about his company in the long term, let alone the whole economy. So when you have this kind of thinking, that's why Wall Street is set to blow.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that he came out and he wrote this. I like the fact that he was self-aware enough to leave that kind of culture. But at the same time, I mean, I think this is something that everyone kind of suspected. You just needed someone that was part of that culture to come out and be really, really honest about it. So now he's working for this nonprofit organization, and he says that he's more fulfilled doing that. So it's really great that he's doing it. But people like him are very rare. I mean, once you get a taste of that lifestyle and that kind of money, like you're hooked for life.
Yeah, people like him, ironically, are worth their weight in gold. The thing is, I was making a joke. They've done studies.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to. So, when you have to point out it's a joke, it's a great one. They've done studies, right?
That one too, right?
Yeah. So when they've done studies, and about what happiness is. So we're taught at a young age, work hard, achieve a thing. When you achieve the thing, you'll feel happy. But that isn't never how it turns out. That isn't how it happens. You're on to the next thing. And I've learned that in my whole life, right? So I've achieved all the goals I'd set for myself. Turns out I didn't set enough. And every time
Barack Obama?
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Right.
And the thing is, after I, succeeded in accomplishing what I thought was my life goal, I didn't feel any more accomplished, really. My mind was on the next thing, and it never stops. And so now they're trying to do this thing. I saw this guy give a TED talk about this from Harvard, and they're trying to teach people how to use, that whole thing about happiness isn't a goal, it's a way. And you try to do things, and they have actual strategies now that can teach you how to be more optimistic. They have ways that can train the way you think differently now, so you can appreciate things more. So if they have exercises where you write down things that you are appreciative of every day, 20 new things, and after a month, it's changed the way you see the world, literally, and you're now happier. So that's what this guy's saying. He's like, hey, I had everything that they say is supposed to bring happiness. And it didn't. And it doesn't to these guys either, by the way. That's why they're still out there trying to get more and more and more, because they're still empty inside.
And that's part of why that Tom Perkins guy talked about the war on the rich and the Kristallnacht and all that. Because even if you have 3.6 million, as this guy did in one bonus alone, he thinks, well, I didn't get enough. I should have gotten 8 million. And the guy next to me has so much more than me. And then so he already feels like a victim. And so when progressives come and say, hey, you guys have rigged the rules and you have more than you're supposed to, if you hadn't rigged the rules, like, then they feel doubly victimized.
Yes.
Because in this context, they don't understand how much they have vis-a-vis the rest of the world, right?
Yes.
They just know that they're making less than the guy sitting next to them.
Yes.
And so that's another reason why they feel like victims.
Yeah. And I love what you said, Jimmy, about how happiness has been taken and it's been twisted by American culture, right? Where happiness always has to do with money, your financial success, your career success. What you said was so beautiful, because you should focus on the things that money can't buy. Your health, your family, love. Like you can't get that from money. And I think that people that work in that world forget that. You know what I mean? They focus too much and they prioritize too much on their financial well-being when they should be focusing on other things that actually genuinely make you happy.
Jimmy, you are a beautiful person.
Thank you very much.
It's
a beautiful point.
So now let me add one quick thing about this. Look, that's the one thing that I emphasize most, appreciation, right? But it's a tough thing. And I remember in college, they had me write a paper in a business class, in a management class, about this guy who was incredibly successful but was never satisfied. And he wanted more, and it had all these details. And so they say, why is he not satisfied, right? And it's a business paper. I don't know why it was a weird question, right? So I'm like, I don't know what they were asking, but I'm gonna answer it. I'm gonna give them the real answer, because even back then, that's what I did, right? And it's no matter if it affected my grade or not. I wrote this article about how that's the paradox of the successful man. What drives him to be successful is that he's never satisfied. But since that's what's in him, his success is irrelevant because he's never satisfied. Right?
Yes.
And the grade came back C. And TA said, hey, Socrates, it's a management paper, not a philosophy paper.
I love that paper, though. That's awesome, because it's true.
Yes.
And you have a little bit of that, Cenk.
Oh, I do, yeah, I do.